Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. This 30-minute podcast features a new author interviewed by me every single day, 365 days a year, for about 30 minutes. I am also the publisher for Zibby Books, which publishes 12 books a year in fiction and memoir. Our books are already out now. You can check it out on zibbybooks.com. And we have a magazine called Zibby Mag, where we have lots of wonderful essays and lifestyle features. That's at zibbymag.com. We have classes at zibbyclasses.com. And I recently opened a bookstore in LA called Zibby's Bookshop at 1113 Montana Avenue at 11th Street in Santa Monica. I hope that you are able to enjoy some of our other offerings. But this here podcast is the basis of all of it and started in 2018. And no matter what I do, this is basically my favorite thing. Enjoy. Jane Roper is the author of The Society of Shame. And by the way, I loved this book so much. Jane is the author of 2 previous books, a memoir, Double Time, and a novel, Eden Lake. Her short fiction essays and humor have appeared in publications including McSweeney's Internet Tendency, The Millions, The Rumpus, Salon, and Poets and Writers, and on NPR. Jane is a graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop and lives in the Boston area with her husband and 2 children. And by the way, Jane Roper's book, The Society of Shame, will be my August book club pick for Zibby's Book Club. If you're not a member, go to zibbysbookclub.com. That's zibbysbookclub.com, and you can learn all about it. You can even start your own chapter of the club if you are interested. Just go online and check it out. In the meantime, Jane Roper, Society of Shame. Welcome, Jane. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss The Society of Shame.
Thank you so much for having me. Thrilled to be here.
So Jane, I had seen your book picked for all these different profiles and I don't know, I just saw it getting lots of press and I just hadn't dipped into it myself, but I was so excited to talk to you about it. And literally from the first page, I was laughing so hard. My husband and I started reading it out loud to him and we were crying laughing. It's so smart. It's so funny. I'm just such a huge fan. I'm such a huge fan.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you laughed. That was my goal, to make everyone laugh.
You're just the way you think about everything and the way you describe everybody, and even Aggie's friends with the small head. Just the littlest details, just totally got me. Not to mention the premise of the whole book. So anyway, let me back up and have you tell listeners what the book is about, and then I'd love to know what inspired this book and if it was what happened in the book or, some of it. Tell me the whole thing.
Okay, sure. So the book is about Kathleen Held, who is a 47-year-old perimenopausal wife and mom married to a very up-and-coming politician. She comes home one night to find her garage on fire, her husband in his underwear, and his very disheveled mistress lying nearby. On the scene, a bystander snaps a photo, and in that photo, you can see that
not just a bystander, the funniest cab driver character that you kept going. I mean, so funny. Anyway, sorry, just had to.
Yeah, and you should hear the audiobook. The audiobook reader makes him I was even laughing at my own character because she made it so funny. Okay. But anyway, he snaps a photo, and in the photo, you can see that Kathleen has a big period stain on the back of her pants. The photo, of course, promptly goes viral, but the thing people are fixated on is not that this Senate candidate had an affair, but that she has this period stain. And she becomes this unwitting hero of this new movement called Yes, We Bleed, to destigmatize menstruation. And then craziness ensues as she figures out how to manage her newfound fame.
It's so funny. It's so great because it's not just about the effect of sort of this shocking betrayal on her and her family and navigating being a mom while you have all these terrible things happen and being unwittingly thrust in the public eye. But then, the compatriots of shame, if you will, raise an even bigger point of what happens to all the people who are getting canceled all the time, which is an interesting question to examine and one that the public seems to have sort of no sympathy for as a group, right? That it's okay to this person did that, they're canceled, let's ruin their lives. But then the book kind of asks like, well, what about them and what happens next? I don't know. I found it absolutely fascinating, not to mention all the way you poke fun at like some of the campaigns in the wider world and the Twitter sphere and like all the funny, little tweets and hashtags you make. And it's so great. It's so smart. So tell me about this whole book. And this is your first novel? This is crazy.
This is my first sort of major novel. I had a novel published like ages ago with a teeny press. So this has been a really different experience. And then I also have a memoir about parenting twins. We need to talk about twins.
Yes, we have to talk about twins. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always been, as sort of a creature of the internet, fascinated with how quickly things snowball online and also how knee-jerk people can be. And that certainly shows up with the, online shaming. And I think there certainly are times when it's appropriate and times when it's appropriate but goes way out of proportion. So I wanted to kind of hold a mirror up to that and kind of make fun of, both the canceling and the cancelees. But yeah, so Kathleen, once she's had this thing happen, she intercepts an invitation to something called the Society of Shame. And like you said, so she meets up with these other folks who have done things to varying degrees of awfulness to some stuff that's kind of innocent, but they're all trying to rehabilitate their images. And knowing some people who have been on the receiving end of this kind of thing, like, how do they move on? Do they actually learn and grow from it? Or is there a backlash where they kind of dig in? Like there's one character in the book that really digs in. She calls the police on a Black utility worker, but she refuses to kind of grow from the experience. And then there are others who do, want to actually change and grow from it. So yeah, I've always been interested in those kinds of stories. And there was an actual story that kind of sparked the idea for this, where someone came home and found his wife and her lover, like, this is actually really sad, but dead in the car in the garage where they'd been fooling around. And that kind of just got me thinking about being betrayed by your spouse, but then having it happen in this like humiliating way that becomes a subject of jokes. And so that kind of got me thinking.
In James Stewart's new book, Unscripted, about Sumner Redstone, he talks about how there was this huge fire at the hotel he was staying in and how he had to escape out the window. And that's why his hand is like maimed. But there was a girl in the room with him who had to been like under the radar, because obviously this was not the same time as now where things like that could stay a little bit quieter.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's sort of the same thing. Like there's a fire and what's going on and who are you caught with at any given moment? It's like, what happens when, like, if it's that whole adage of like, you shouldn't be doing anything you don't want on the front page of the paper. Right? Yeah, right. Whenever you freeze frame, could be some disaster that will capture it in time and never let people forget,
Yeah, exactly. And that happens over and over again in the book, not just with Kathleen, but other characters too. Yeah. It's like they do some little thing and all of a sudden it blows up. And I made it, of course, over the top. But while I was writing the book, sometimes I'd write something that I thought, oh, haha, this is crazy. This would never happen. And then something like it happens. And I'm like, oh, geez, why am I bothering to try to write satire when life is satire? It's crazy.
I mean, I don't know when this episode's coming out, but right now it's like, I don't know, day 6 of the whole Sofia Coppola daughter pasta viral video. Yeah. And I was literally like looking at that last night with Kyle, my husband. I'm like, this was a 49-second video. Like this was just less than a minute of her life. And now like 15 million people have watched her with this pasta making, commentary on her life in the helicopter and whatever.
The helicopter, yeah.
And, that's her life. Like that's always going to be associated with her from a 1 minute, like maybe lapse of judgment. And why are we all so fascinated? And then I felt bad. Like, why am I even watching this? But like, I have to see, why is everybody else watching it? And
of course. Yeah. It's impossible to look away. It's like car crashes over and over again. And we're just like, we can't help. One of my favorite blurbs from the book from my friend Steve Allman, he says our lust for rubbernecking. And it's so true. Yeah.
It's so true. How did this writing journey come to be? Like, where did you talk about your writing communities and Grub Street and all the places you're involved with. And also you said in your acknowledgements how I guess your husband had always thought you could do it and maybe you hadn't thought you could do it, which of course mirrors the character in the book. And I have to tell you also, I wrote this book Blank, which is coming out next year, which is similar in some ways too, in that it's like a woman who's a writer, and it's sort of like a funny take on publishing. Anyway, I'm going to have to send it to you because I don't want you to think I stole any of your ideas or anything. Oh my gosh. But it's like, some similarities.
Oh, I'd love to read that. Well, yeah, now you're a publisher now. So yeah.
No, I'm not publishing it. I actually wrote it myself.
Right. No, I mean, but you are a publisher. Like now Zibby Owens is publisher. So
that's true. Yeah.
The inside track.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I can't wait to read it. Yeah. I mean, it was a long journey to this book. So yeah, the thing you're referring to where my husband said, he kept telling me when I would write other things, it's good, but you're not using all your tools. You're not using all your tools. So I got an MFA. I was writing, this was years ago, but I was writing very serious stuff. And the first book I wrote was this historical fiction. It was quite sincere. And then the second novel I wrote, Eden Lake, came out with a small press. That was also not very funny. I wrote a whole other novel that didn't get published. And again, it was on these very serious themes. And yeah, my husband and other folks were like, why don't you write funny stuff? Like in your nonfiction, you're funny. In real life, you're kind of funny. My kids don't think I am, but I just didn't know how to bring that to fiction. And I think part of me was like, well, I have serious themes I want to explore. I have to be a serious writer. So it really, this was like over the course of 15 years to get from thinking this is what I should write and this is who I should be as a writer to being like, oh, screw it. I want to have fun. Like I'm tired of just not having fun. So I went way over the top at the beginning, and that kind of gave me permission to just go with it. But it was a whole other writing experience. And I took a class with Jenna Blum, who's a fabulous writer and teacher. And there are a whole bunch of awesome writers in this class, some of whom are already published, some of whom are going to be published soon. And it was such a great experience because I felt like they're urging me on, like, yeah, you could do this, you could do this. So it was a total fantastic experience. And I'm still having fun. So that's good.
Jenna is awesome. I love Jenna.
Yeah.
So when did you start it? And did it just flow out of you? Like, was this super fast? Like, tell me a little more visibility into the.
Sure. So I will say that the previous novel I wrote that did not get published, I worked on for 5 years. Oh. Granted, my kids were younger then, so it was a little harder. And one of my daughters was getting over a serious illness. But still, I just labored over the thing. And when that didn't find a home with a publisher, I really grieved for a little while, and I was like, I'm never going to write a book again. But then this other idea came along and I was like, all right, I'm going to do this fast. I'm never again going to spend 5 years on a book that I don't know is going to get published. And it did. It just kind of flowed. I don't know if it's ever going to happen again. I feel like this might be one off of a book that really just went fast. So I started it in early 2019 and finished it in early 2020, just before the pandemic. That's a terrible time to try to go out and sell a book, but nevertheless. And then I had some back and forth with my agent to improve it. So that was the timeline.
Oh my gosh. So cool. The cover is so cool with the swan, which of course, once I get far enough, I realize why you did that. At first I was like, the swan, I don't even know. Anyway, figured it out, obviously.
Yeah, I love the cover. I was so thrilled. It's nothing like what I expected, but when I saw it, first of all, my agent was like, oh, the designer actually read the whole book because the swans do come further on, but it serves as such a great metaphor, right? Of pride. And I love the sunglasses, but also the idea of an ugly duckling turning into a swan. So yeah, I adore, and I keep buying blue and orange clothes and accessories and stuff. I can't stop. It's bad.
Those were the colors of my wedding, I have to say.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a great combo.
And it's so great. Yeah. I love blue and orange, especially the navy and this shade of orange. So wait, go back to your nonfiction book of the memoir and the twins and all of that. Tell me more about that.
Sure. Yeah. So I wrote a memoir called Double Time, How I Survived and Mostly Thrived Through the First 3 Years of Mothering Twins. And it's about my early journey as a twin mom and also dealing with depression, clinical depression at the time. But I had been blogging for a while ever since I was pregnant. And I had developed a certain voice and a certain approach to writing about my kids without hopefully, but it was more about me than about my kids. I think most good parenting writing is. So yeah, I just decided I want to turn this into something more of a narrative. And that was a great experience too. That one also kind of flowed. I find nonfiction easier than fiction in a way, but it was fun to capture this, as you know, like the chaos of twins, but also the fantastic parts about it. So yeah, that was a weird publishing journey though, because literally 6 weeks after it was published, my daughter, as I said, she was diagnosed with leukemia. She's great now. She's 16 years old and thriving, but also like, it was weird. It was kind of all of a sudden, it was like, oh, I want nothing to do with this book. Like this book is about this happy, precious time. And now I'm fighting for my child's life.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Did you end up
Sorry to bring it down.
No, it's fine. Did you end up writing about the leukemia time of life?
I did. I blogged throughout the whole thing, which was really kind of a form of therapy for me and a source of support. So that was great. And what was really nice about that was later hearing from other parents going through the same thing, that they, it was helpful for them. And I wrote about it in that novel that didn't get published, the not fun one.
Wait, tell me about that. Maybe it has a new life now that you have this published.
I don't know. I feel like maybe it's not like who I am as a writer now, but it was about, the whole experience, obviously when you have an ill child, it's like horrible, but we were sort of our family going into it with the best case scenario, right? We had resources, we had friends and family, but I kept imagining like how much harder it is for those who are not so fortunate. So I wrote a story more from the point of view of someone who's from a really troubled family, troubled situation, who has a child with cancer, but her sort of do-gooder neighbor kind of she's a little bit of like a drama vampire or an emotional vampire who wants to come in and help, and it gets a little creepy and invasive. But it's very much about class. It's about gentrification. I think it's a decent book, but it's very different from what I'm doing now. So I don't know if it will have or even needs to have a life, but it was good to write. Cathartic.
I feel like my own experience is so similar to yours. And now I'm like I also wrote about my twins. I wrote I self-published it because I had no intention of publishing it. I didn't try to. I wanted to make it a gift for my best friend who was having twins.
Oh, that's great.
Morsels, what I learned from having twins. And then I wrote a memoir, and I also have written I tried to write literary fiction. I wrote an entire book as a prose poem,
That's impressive.
Thank you. And I don't write poetry, but I was like, oh, I just every sentence will be a line, and I'll do it like this, and this will be so great. And, and then I finally was just like, you know what? I'm just going to make it funny and have fun. And that's the book. Now that's the one coming out because it's much more who I am. And I'm I tried so hard to write the books I thought I was supposed to write, or that would be important or respected or whatever. And I don't even know. It wasn't until I just let go of all of it.
Totally.
That it worked for me. And so I don't know, but I just feel like I'm
it's the same. I mean, that's the same thing.
It's it's the same sort of.
You have to put all of yourself in. I think that's when you find, that's finding your voice, right? It's letting go of what you think you should do and doing what you love to do, what gives you pleasure, what gives you joy. Not that it's never hard, but I think that's the case in so many things, right? When we're trying to do what we think we should do, there's a part of us that we're denying to ourselves. So it makes sense that the book where you're finally I'm just going to have fun, that's where you're going to succeed. And that's awesome.
So funny. Well, this feels so cinematic to me. Has it been optioned yet? Are you working on that?
Not yet, but oh my gosh, I would be so thrilled if that happened. So, if you know anyone, put in a good word. I think it would be a fun series. I think it would be
so too.
Yeah, we'll see.
It's just so timely and topical. Okay. I'll see if I can sprinkle any fairy dust on it.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have people working on it, but it's just so good. And I love even the whole political, what does it mean when your spouse wants to do something? You even had something at the beginning, or maybe not the beginning, but how Kat or Kathleen or whatever has to grit her teeth when her husband is okay, well, now I want to run for office. And she's haven't I just been waiting around for you? Now we have to take even less of you.
Right. We have to share you with even more people.
And just to live out your dream. But how can she not support his dream?
Right.
And it's one of those when is it her turn? Which of course is the crux of the book, but it's how do you support your spouse and help them follow their dreams when it diametrically as opposed to what you will gain from it. Not that you're ever supposed to think that way, you know?
Right. Yeah. I think and that probably happens more than it's tough when especially if you have two people who, are ambitious and, have passions. And Kathleen did have a passion, but she sort of, it's two things, she sort of gave up quickly because she couldn't handle the rejection. She was an aspiring writer, but she also, she had to increasingly sublimate her own thing to her husband, who's like this charismatic, slightly smarmy politician guy. But yeah, and I think it's something in midlife too, for midlife women, you kind of have this come to Jesus where you're like, well, am I doing what I want to be doing? Am I just being a, support for other people, or am I really doing what I am passionate about? So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, as a 46-year-old woman, this could not have rung more true for me. The whole thing is just so funny. And also, you must be so thrilled, or not thrilled. But like there is such a spotlight now on menopause, and like that it's now all these nonfiction books are being, held up, and the huge thing in the Times recently. And like finally people are like talking about it.
Yes.
All of that.
Yes.
So this is like the most timely read, honestly.
Well, yeah, certainly we're almost the same. I'm 48 and I'm like, it's on my mind. And the other thing is like that, periods too. And like, there's just this awful thing, this thing about not in Florida, like not talking to girls about their periods before 6th grade. And it's just, when the average age of onset is between 9 and 14 or something. So yeah, the stuff around period, I guess menstrual justice is sort of what the movement is called, is relevant too. And I'm glad to see that, it's much needed and much overdue, but yeah.
I mean, not that I should be sharing this, but like, I didn't know what was happening when I got cause I was pretty young and I literally thought like I was dying.
Oh God. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's the worst, but anyway. Yeah. I was like, nobody taught me about it in school for like 2 more years,
Oh gosh. Wow. Yeah.
It was late in my school and I was early and whatever. So, you just,
you got to be talking about it more openly, which I still find hard, honestly. Like my kids are way more open about this stuff than I am. Like my daughter will like call down the stairs, like, Mom, can you bring me a pad? And like, my husband's right there. Like, I never would have done anything like that as a kid. My God, I would have died.
No. Me neither. And even, I can't even think of any other books that even address something like this this is like one of those essays you write, like, what's the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to you?
Yeah, right.
But it has happened. And I know you write about this in the book, how many people it's happened to, and that there's this whole outpouring of people who have had, spotting or whatever you want to call it, or like, the splotch you called it at one point, all of that.
Yeah.
But just, the other sort of indignities of the fact that this happens to us and like making it so funny. And I don't know, it's about time, basically.
Yeah, right. It shouldn't be a big deal, but it inevitably is, of course, And I think people don't know also that like when you're perimenopausal, like when you're approaching menopause, your periods can be bonkers. And that's sort of like, they can be all out of whack. They can be heavy, they can be light, they can disappear. So yeah. We don't talk about that kind of stuff enough. That's why I'm talking about it now.
Yeah. And even how impossible it is to cut short getting your highlights done.
Yeah.
Even if you have somewhere to be, you just cannot cut that process off.
No, you cannot. You can't start yanking those foils out. No, you gotta sit through it.
And I loved your New York and Hamptons seat, like the whole thing. It was just so great. It was so great.
Oh, thank you.
I really, really loved it. So are you working on another novel now or another memoir? Or what are you up to?
I'm working on a novel in my head. Like I haven't put much on the page yet, but it's baking. It's about two pair of twin sisters who hate each other, but have to sort of band together when their little coastal town on Cape Cod is destroyed by like a giant storm. So it's kind of cli-fi, but it's silly cli-fi. Not silly, but
I've never heard that term before.
You haven't? Oh, cli-fi. Yeah, it's any books about climate change. Cli-fi.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot out there.
So out of it. I mean, it's yeah, of course.
Yeah, now you heard it here first. There you go.
Heard it there first.
Now you're going to start. Now that's all you're going to see, right? You're just going to.
No, I mean, I know there are a lot of books like that, and I've like done. I just haven't heard it as a term. I love
the term.
that.
Yeah.
like quit lit and cli-fi and all these like subgenres of books and all of that.
Yeah.
So what's the most creative sort of marketing thing that's been going on with your book?
Oh, that's a good question. So Anchor, the publisher, they made a cool little package, and I love they created to go out to influencers, and they made a bookmark that says #yes we bleed on one side and #yes we read on the other side. Which I thought was great. Like we just keep coming up with yes we whatever, yes we pour the book around, yes we whatever. So that was pretty cool. I don't know. I'm hoping there'll be more fun stuff ahead.
So exciting.
Yeah. It's been fun.
Well, Jane, I'm such a fan. And again, I have not laughed until I cried this hard in so long. It was so great. It's just so funny. I couldn't put it down. Could not put it down. I'm so excited.
Thank you so much. It's awesome talking with you. I really appreciate it. And I'm so glad that you laughed a lot.
All right. Well, thanks so much. And we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, hope so. All right. Okay. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.